We want to welcome everyone to our annual 3D press conference. And when we say 3D, we're talking about drunk and drugged driving. And we always know that impaired driving fatalities don't just include alcohol, but they also include drugs and prescription drugs. And today is always a special day when we can remember the victims of impaired driving, and the lights that you see are representative of all the lives that were lost as a result of impaired driving over the course of this last year. I want to thank all the members of the media for being here today, and as evidence behind me, just the partnerships that we have with agencies all across the state. Departments of Transportation, Department of Safety, local police agencies, sheriffs from all across the state that are representative of law enforcement, because they are the ones who take our message to the grassroots every day in dealing with all of the drivers and the citizens in the state of Tennessee. I want to introduce to you now a very, very special guest of the Governor's Highway Safety Office in this press conference today, and that is Ms. Mary Page. Ms. Page.
I'd like to thank Director Poole and his office, especially Megan Buell, for giving me the opportunity to come here today to speak. It is also very important to our family that while I'm here, I recognize and give thanks to the Metropolitan Police Department, Sheriff's Department, and Attorney's General Office for supporting and working with our family so closely during the last 5 years. I'm here today to introduce you to my only birth child and my daughter's youngest child, Jessica Page Muller. On October 26, 2008, Jessie was 24 years old and had been married for 7 weeks. She married a veteran of the wars of Afghanistan and Iraq, and they had waited 7 years. She and her best friend since kindergarten, Emily Baker Schutz, were having a girls' night out, the first time they'd seen each other since Jessica's wedding a few weeks earlier. Jessie was the designated driver. Her blood alcohol level was 0.02%. On their way home, as Jessie attempted to turn north onto Raleigh Parkway from Vultee Boulevard, a 19-year-old young man named Wesley Parker Ellis, with a blood alcohol level of double the legal limit, ran the red light at a speed of approximately 60 miles an hour in a Ford Explorer and broadsided my daughter. Witnesses testified that her car went airborne before rolling on 2 wheels down Raleigh Parkway and ultimately landing in a ditch. Jessie died at the scene in her best friend's lap. Thankfully, Emily was not seriously injured physically, but she will suffer the emotional damage of that night for the rest of her life. Thanks to the excellent investigation by Metro PD and the very creative sentencing of Judge Mark Fishburne, Mr. Ellis will be paying for the crime of killing my child until he's 32 years old. Is that justice? No, of course it's not justice. Were we satisfied? Of Of course, we weren't satisfied. He killed our child. That is every parent's worst fear. Jessie was studying to be a nurse. She was a caregiver. She wanted to help save people's lives. She was a loving, giving soul full of life and joy. Mr. Ellis killed a young woman who would have contributed greatly to our community in a positive and selfless way because he chose to drink and drive. But because of law enforcement across this state and the thankless jobs that you do, Mr. Ellis is paying for his crimes now. Unfortunately, your task is never complete. Death rates rise and fall year after year. In 2008, there were 287 killed. This year, those numbers have risen. I can only imagine how very weary our law enforcement officers get. As a parent who saw up close and personal the work that you do, I can only tell you how very grateful your communities are for you. When you're out on the highways in the dark and the cold, and you have to use the jaws of life to get a beautiful young woman out of a crushed car, and you can't help but think that it could be your daughter or your sister or your young wife. Please remember how important the job you are doing is to the people in this state. Please know that there are families like mine who support and appreciate the kindness and respect you extend to the victims and the families of impaired drivers. And please, never give up on freeing our highways of impaired drivers for the next beautiful young victim may be a member of your own family. Thank you.
I want to thank Mary for her courageous efforts today, and also her husband Richard too for joining us. We thank them for all of their contributions in wake of such a tragedy and why we're here today. I want to introduce to you now a man who is extremely energetic and tireless in his approach to safety on Tennessee roadways and has taken unbelievable special interest in everything that we do in keeping lives from being lost on our roadways in the state of Tennessee. I want to introduce to you the Tennessee Department of Transportation Commissioner John Schroeder.
Ms. Bates, thank you for the courage of coming up and say that. It is meaningful to all of us. We have looked a lot at fatalities and the safety of our highways, and we do, as Kendall said, try to approach it as best that we can, and through the Governor's Highway Safety Office, which does an incredible job. And we are doing better this year, and I think that's a key to what we're trying to. We're trying to develop a system where we have zero fatalities, and I know that is difficult, but we cannot do that with impaired driving, and the numbers speak of themselves. In 2012, we had 306 fatalities that were based upon impaired driving, and in 2013, at this date, we're at 205. So we are 101 below last year. I pray that we're 101 below this year as we end this year. We are We have had 921 fatalities so far in 2013. We were 19 less than this time last year. We are moving in the right direction, even though slow. We started a major campaign in October, and we started putting our messages back on our message boards, and I think all of you have seen that, where we try to notify people how many fatalities we've had year to date as compared to last year. And while we can't say that there's any direct correlation, we started it in October, and I will tell you in November we were 30 less in fatalities in November this year than we were last year. So we hope that that has had an impact, and we continually try to notify the public. In addition to notifying the public and to make sure people are aware, we have to keep people cognizant. But the other thing that we have to do at TDOT is we have to make our roads as safe as possible. We don't want our roads to be the reason there is a fatality. We also want to be able to make them safe so that if someone does something, there's an opportunity for them to survive. And our cable barriers are an important part of what we do. Just trying to straighten out roads to have wider lanes, to have wider shoulders, to have people the opportunity to recover, to have our rumble strips, those annoying noises that you hear when you go slightly off the road, they save lives. And so we also are trying to protect some people from themselves. And it's one of our goals. But until we can get the behavioral part under control and have people buckle up and drive to the point where they are not impaired, and we also have to mention, while it's not part of this, but our distracted driving issue is a critical issue. We have to get people's behavior going, and I will say that I think all of these gentlemen behind me work tirelessly to do that, and ladies, excuse me. And that is our mission here today, to make people aware of what they're doing, and we appreciate all the effort. And again, Ms. Page, thank you for your ability to come here. I know it's difficult, and maybe your message today can save the life of another beautiful person. Thank you.
I want to recognize one of our great law enforcement partners, safety partners from across the state, Commissioner Bill Gibbons, and I know you've been joined today too by Deputy Commissioner Godwin. Thank you, Commissioner Godwin, for being here as well. But Commissioner Gibbons is also a tireless supporter and actually has seen the victims of impaired driving from his previous role as a district attorney general. So we want to be sure and remember that prosecution plays a huge part in the role of impaired driving as well. With that, I want to introduce Commissioner Bill Gibbons of the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security.
Well, thank you very much, Kendall, and Ms. Page, as well as Mr. Page. We especially appreciate your presence today. The number one priority of our state troopers is to reduce the number of traffic fatalities in our state. And our state troopers do that in various ways. First of all, at kind of the local level, county level, we have things like checkpoints. But we also have a number of statewide initiatives designed to do that, and I want to mention two very quickly. First of all, during the Thanksgiving holidays, Colonel Trott, from whom you're going to hear in a few minutes, came up with what I thought was an excellent idea, and that was to make sure that during a 12-hour period on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and a 12-hour period on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, that we would have state troopers every 20 miles on I-40 from the North Carolina border to the Mississippi River Bridge. Colonel Trott went an extra step though, and he persuaded every state through which I-40 travels to also participate in that. So during those two 12-hour periods, during the Thanksgiving holidays, from North Carolina to California, we had state troopers every 20 miles on I-40. During those two periods, not a single person lost his or her life on I-40. So it served its purpose. It served as a deterrent to bad driving behaviors. And that was the whole point of it. Another example is our so-called no refusal policy. We will be implementing this policy during the upcoming holiday season. And basically under that policy, we will choose particular counties in Tennessee, and we have not decided which counties yet, under which we will implement this policy. Under the policy, if someone is stopped and we have reasonable suspicion that that individual is driving under the influence, if that individual refuses to take a breathalyzer test, we will seek a search warrant to draw blood from that individual. That will be an across-the-board policy. Now, obviously, it will be up to each individual judge as to whether or not to grant the warrant, but we are going to seek a warrant in every single case in those counties. And we will have judges on standby as well as the proper medical technicians to make sure that we can implement that policy. So that's another example of what we're trying to do to reduce the number of traffic fatalities in our state by reducing the number of individuals who are driving under the influence. So far this year, or through the end of November, state troopers across the state made 5,911 DUI arrests, 5,911 through the end of November. Now that's a 9% increase over the first 11 months of 2012, but more significantly, it is a 92% increase over the number of arrests made during the first 11 months of 2010. So you can see we're being very proactive and encouraging our state troopers through data-driven deployment of where they are and what time they're there to make sure that we're doing the best job we can to make sure that we do not have individuals on our roads driving under the influence and holding them accountable when they are. Finally, I want to thank our local partners across the state. Our state troopers can get out there and work hard at this and do their jobs, but it really takes all of law enforcement. It takes sheriff's departments from across the state, police departments across the state, all of us working together to reduce the number of traffic fatalities in our state, to reduce the number of individuals driving under the influence. So I want to commend our state troopers for what they're doing as part of the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, but I also want to commend all of those local law enforcement agencies who are also working very hard to make our highways safer.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. He mentioned Colonel Tracy Trott in his remarks as the leader of the Tennessee Highway Patrol. We're very blessed and very fortunate to have a leader like Colonel Trott leading the Tennessee Highway Patrol. He's not only recognized as a leader of the state of Tennessee, but all across the country, as you heard of his ability to gather so many states and their law enforcement folks to participate in the recent I-40 challenge. Colonel Tracy Trott, Tennessee Highway Patrol.
Thank you, Kendall. I'm going to be very honest with you. Over the holiday season, impaired driving gets a lot of attention. But for 365 days a year, it's the #1 priority of the Tennessee Highway Patrol. We make no bones about that. I'm sure in the 6,000 arrests that we've made this year, that there has been some lives saved. It's hard to articulate how many or how many injuries have been prevented, but I'm sure the public is a much safer place than it would be without the Tennessee Highway Patrol and the work done by the state troopers. Throughout the holiday season, the THP will be conducting DUI and safety belt checkpoints, saturation patrols, no refusal operations, and we'll utilize federal overtime, some of it funneled through the Governor's Highway Safety Office, to put extra troopers on the road and maximize our force. I really want to thank my partners, the Sheriff's Association and the Chiefs Association, for their help in public safety. We could not be successful without their help. Your safety this holiday season will likely depend on the choices that you make as a driving public. Don't drink and drive, #1. Always wear your seatbelt. That's the most important thing and the best thing you can do to protect yourself. #2. And #3, drive defensively and not aggressively. And #4, don't text or use your cell phone and drive. If you do those 4 things, the chances of you having a safe holiday are increased quite a bit. We'll be out in force to protect you as much as possible, but you have to take some responsibility upon yourself to do that too. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for your remarks and your leadership, Colonel Trott. You've heard different components of what changing driver behavior does. It's education, and you've heard from Mary Payton this morning. It's enforcement. When we're start talking about the enforcement of the laws from Commissioner Gibbons and Colonel Trott, but a huge part of that enforcement is our local law enforcement officers across the state. I can't say enough about our partnership with the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police, and Maggie does a tremendous job in leading the TACP. The current president of the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police is with us today and wants to share some remarks with you. I want to welcome Chief David Moore.
Thank you, Director Phil. Effective public safety requires clear vision, purpose, resources, and dedication. Through collaborative partnerships fostered by the Governor's Highway Safety Office, Tennessee Department of Safety, and local law enforcement across the state of Tennessee, we have become more precise in our focus, more effective in our enforcement, and more dedicated by continued analysis and communication of enforcement needs. The commissioners you've heard from today, Colonel Trott of the Tennessee Highway Patrol, and Director Poole of Governor's Highway Safety Office bring a passion to the message of highway safety and data-driven knowledge of trends and services needed that result in direct enforcement that saves lives every day in the state of Tennessee, make no mistake. On behalf of the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police, thank you for your continued and relentless efforts to collaborate all of law enforcement efforts in the safety of Tennesseans across the state.
Thank you, Chief Moore. Yet another crucial partner to us in our efforts all across the state is with the Tennessee Sheriff's Association. And sheriffs and their deputies have many more things on their plate than just traffic safety many times, but a focus on traffic safety means effective management of crime in their particular counties. I want to introduce to you, representing the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, Sheriff Chris Mathis from Carter County.
I currently represent Region 1 as Vice President, and on behalf of the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, it's an honor to be asked and to be here this afternoon. One of the things that I was going to speak on here just for just a second is I noticed the candles representing all the victims' families. It says one word, it says arrive. The philosophy I have with my deputies is simply that you have to arrive. You can't help individuals, whether it be a domestic or an accident or anything that you get called on. You can't do anything unless you arrive. There's moms and dads that deserve the opportunity this holiday season to eat grandma's cake. There's sons and daughters that deserve the opportunity to open up that present from underneath the tree this Christmas season. This sweet lady that spoke earlier, my heart breaks for you. Her family and many of the victims' families across this country, their hopes, their dreams, their futures are often taken by a drunk driver, someone taking drugs and choosing to drive on our highways. On behalf of the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, 95 counties across the state of Tennessee, our great partners with the Chiefs Association across the state of Tennessee, you have our word, you have our commitment. And with the Governor's initiative, folks like Colonel Trott, I have to brag on Colonel Trott, he's the Carter County Board. Very proud of him. And you see initiatives that go across just our state, but across our country, that are saving lives. we are all committed as law enforcement partners and friends to do something about drunk drivers. And again, with these candles, it says arrive. And that's our goal, that over the holiday season and for the next upcoming year, is that people across this country will reduce those drunk drivers. And just, again, with our partnerships, on behalf of the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, we hope that everyone will just do that. Use common sense, do what Colonel Trott says, increase those odds, and do that. Arrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. And to conclude our guest today, I want to introduce somebody representing the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Matt has been a crucial part in helping the fight against impaired driving since the 1970s. And I can't think of a more effective representative that they have than Brad Bulla. And Brad has joined us today to share some comments regarding impaired driving, his feelings, and Matt's feelings on that. So, Brad?
Thank you, Kendall, Megan, Governor Highway Safety Office. Thank you, law enforcement. You've been a tremendous encouragement to me over the years, and I especially want to thank Mary. I am so sorry for your loss. This candle represents my son, Jedediah David Bulla, who was killed August 3rd, 2005 by a drunk driver. I do a lot of speaking, and people ask, why do you speak? This must be so difficult for you. It takes courage. I appreciate your courage. And on a very basic level, I tell them that it gives me an opportunity to say my son's name. We really are in a war, and I'm going to make my comments very brief, but they're very pointed and very sincere. This is a war. In 2009, nationally, there was 9,865 fatalities due to impaired driving. In 2012, that number went up nearly 500 to 10,322. Those just sound like statistics to us, but when you're suddenly plunged into the world where your son or your daughter is taken prematurely, those statistics take on a whole new relevance in your life. And I do appreciate the signs hanging over the road. I know they make a difference. They make me think, and I know they make others think. Very much appreciate that. In this element, or this struggle we have against drunk driving, has many of the aspects of a war. And that we have a common enemy, and irresponsibility, and ignorance, and complacency. And we have tragedies and fatalities. Our young people are dying and being slaughtered on America's highways. And I guess very simply, if I can encourage anything, it will be for us to take up the mantle with renewed vigor and not grow complacent in our struggle, so that we can eliminate what Mary has to go through, what I have to go through, and what people like me go through when they lose a son, a daughter, a husband, brother, sister, mother. Because in reality, we spend the rest of our lives living with a terminally broken heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. And what you've seen on the stage today is a completely integrated, comprehensive effort from the state of Tennessee and the leadership in addressing engineering and addressing safety. Commissioner Gibbons, Commissioner Schroer, thank you so much for being here today, and the law enforcement partners, the chiefs, the sheriffs, and the families that are represented here today. That are symbolic of all of the lives. I would just like to conclude this press conference by just taking a brief moment of silence to remember all the families that have lost a loved one due to impaired driving over the course of the last year, and then we will conclude our press conference. Thank you. thank you to the members of the media today for being here today. That means an important, it's very important to us that you're here, so we greatly appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. Have a safe and happy holiday season.